Gavin Sherwood went still in the middle of his own champagne toast when he saw her. A woman in a gray catering uniform, 8 months pregnant, quietly wiping a champagne ring from the white tablecloth nearest the entrance. Because 10 months ago, Quinn Barrette had been the person he was supposed to build a life with. He hadn't been the one to end it. That was the part he still couldn't set down cleanly. It had simply stopped. A series of silences that grew longer. A conversation in his kitchen on a Tuesday in October where she had set her coffee mug down with unusual care and said, "I don't think this is working anymore, Gavin." He had stood there in his good suit, already late for a board meeting, and had not found the words to argue. By the time he came home that evening, her things were gone. Neat, thorough, nothing left behind except a dry cleaning tag on the back of the closet door, and the particular quality of silence that follows a person who has decided not to make a scene. He had told himself it was mutual. He had told himself it was the right call. He was 6 weeks away from the biggest professional moment of his life, and relationships required a kind of presence he could not afford. He had believed that more or less until now. The gallery floor of Meridian Tower was everything his architects had promised. 40-foot ceilings, floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking Burrard Inlet, black walnut panels warm under pendant lights that cast the room in amber. 300 guests had come out tonight. Investors, city councilors, real estate journalists, old friends who had believed in Gavin Sherwood early and newer ones who had appeared once believing seemed profitable. There was music from a string quartet in the corner. There were canapes. There was champagne in the kind of thin glass that made you feel, for a moment, that your life had edges worth admiring. 12 years of building the Sherwood Group from a two-man operation above a dry cleaner in Kitsilano into one of Vancouver's most respected development firms. And this was the crown of it. The night was supposed to be everything. Instead, he was staring at Quinn. She had not seen him yet. Her attention was on the table in front of her, methodical, careful. The way she had always approached things that needed to be done well. The gray uniform stretched across her belly. Her dark hair was pinned under a clip that kept slipping forward. Every few minutes she reached up to push it back into place without breaking the rhythm of her work. A small automatic gesture. And something behind Gavin's sternum tightened in a way he was not prepared for. The math arrived before he asked for it. His communications lead was beside him, saying something about media coverage, about the reach of tonight's launch posts. He turned toward her voice without hearing any of it. "Excuse me a moment," he said. He did not move toward Quinn. Not yet. He stood with his champagne glass held loosely in one hand and watched her move from the east wall toward the service station near the windows, and he felt the specific weight of a thing he had set down carelessly, and only now understood had mattered. Quinn Barrette had not known it was a Sherwood Group event until she walked through the loading entrance and saw the logo on the backdrop behind the main stage. By then it was too late to do anything about it. She had taken the shift because Marion Chu had called her 2 days ago with that particular tone, soft but pointed. That meant, "Please, I need someone I can trust." Marion was 62 years old and had worked hospitality events in Vancouver for 3 decades. She had been the one to show Quinn the proper way to carry a loaded tray. When Quinn had first taken on catering shifts 8 months ago, still unsteady from the implosion of her landscape architecture firm, Marion had taught her without making her feel small for not knowing, which was the kind of grace that Quinn had come to understand, was rarer than it had any right to be. "It's a good paying event," Marion had said on the phone. "Glass tower downtown, grand opening for some development company. You'd just be circulating and clearing, nothing heavy, I promise." Quinn had said yes because she always said yes to Marion, and because she was 33 years old with a baby 6 weeks out, and a lease renewal she needed to cover, without breaking into the savings account she had been protecting since August. The savings account for Ethan. She pressed her palm flat against her belly at the thought of his name. He shifted in response, slow and decisive, the way he always did when she was standing still long enough for him to make himself comfortable. She had been at this long enough. The catering shifts, the small freelance contracts, the careful arithmetic of rent versus groceries versus prenatal vitamins, that she had stopped feeling the particular shame of it. Not because the shame had been unfair. It had arrived honestly, in the weeks after the firm dissolved, when she had stood in the empty studio on East Broadway, surrounded by the drawings and material samples and mood boards of a professional life she had built from nothing over 8 years, and understood that it was gone. Clients had followed the money, which had always belonged more to Gavin's network than hers. Others had heard whispers and quietly chosen someone with fewer complications. Her savings had disappeared into legal fees and the slow, unglamorous cost of starting again, when the world has already decided what kind of person you probably are. Then had come the pregnancy. She had sat on the edge of the bathroom tub in her rental on Commercial Drive and held the test in both hands for a long time. The apartment had been so quiet, Just the hum of the old baseboard heater and her own breathing, slightly uneven in the yellow light. She had thought about calling Gavin. She had imagined his voice, careful, controlled, the voice of a man managing a situation rather than feeling it. She had imagined handing him this information across the vast distance of 10 weeks of silence and watching him become someone she could not reach. So she had not called. Instead, she had learned how to survive again. Freelance design jobs when they came. Small budgets, patient clients, the quiet satisfaction of making a modest garden beautiful for people who would actually live in it. Catering shifts when there was no design work. The gradual, unspectacular rebuilding of a life she had not asked to lose. She still had the drawings for the new studio. She was supposed to sign the lease on Tuesday. She reached for a used cocktail napkin near a centerpiece and placed it on her tray. Somewhere across the room a man laughed too loudly at his own story, and the string quartet smoothed it over with a change in tempo. She felt the shift in the room before she understood its source. Not loud, not dramatic. Simply a pocket of stillness that spread outward from one point, the way conversations adjust themselves around the arrival of someone significant, becoming slightly brighter, slightly louder, performing unawareness. Quinn did not look up immediately. She finished clearing the high table. She repositioned her tray. Then she lifted her eyes, because she had learned that not looking never made anything smaller. Gavin Sherwood was standing on the far side of the gallery floor, perhaps 25 meters away. He was not moving. His champagne glass had been lowered and forgotten, hanging at a slight angle from his hand as though the hand had lost interest in the task of holding it correctly. He was wearing a dark suit that fit with the effortless precision that money always seemed to buy. His expression was something she did not have a name for yet. He was looking directly at her. Quinn held his gaze for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds she felt every version of herself she had been in the last 10 months. The woman who had left without a scene because a scene would have required him to be present for it. The woman who had chosen silence over the particular humiliation of watching someone she loved become a person managing her. The woman who had decided, in the quiet of that commercial drive apartment, that she would not make her son a bargaining chip, negotiating that had already ended. She had made her choices. She did not regret them. She did not regret them. Quinn shifted the tray to her other hand and turned back to the table. Marion appeared at her elbow within seconds, moving with the unhurried efficiency of a woman who had read 100 rooms in her career, and could navigate any of them. "Don't look up," Marion said, low and even as though commenting on the canapés. "He's still staring." "I know." "You know him." It was not quite a question. Quinn set a used napkin on her tray with the deliberate care of someone who needed something to do with her hands. "We were together for 2 years," she said. "We ended 10 months ago." Marion was quiet for a moment. Then without ceremony she lifted 3 glasses from the far edge of the table, glasses that were not on Quinn's section, and placed them on her own tray. "I'll take the east corner," she said. "You take the windows are easier tonight." It was a small thing, an entirely unglamorous act of kindness in a room where everything else was designed to be seen. Quinn looked at the side of Marion's face, the silver hair pinned carefully back, the lines at the corners of her eyes, and felt something tighten in her throat that had nothing to do with Gavin Sherwood. "Thank you," she said. Marion nodded once, as though thanks were beside the point, and walked toward the east corner with a tray full of empties, and the quiet authority of someone who had never needed a room to notice her in order to matter in it. Quinn moved toward the windows. Below, Burrard Inlet stretched out under the October dark, the lights of North Vancouver scattered across the water like something spilled and beautiful. She thought about Tuesday, the lease, the empty studio waiting to become something again. She thought about Ethan, who would arrive in this world in 6 weeks and would know nothing of this evening, and who deserved a mother who had kept herself whole in the meantime. She had almost reached the service station when she heard her name spoken from behind and to the left, in a voice she recognized instantly and had hoped, in the vague and implausible way of hoping for things you know are unlikely, never to encounter again in a context like this one. Vanessa Kirsch stood with a champagne flute in one hand and the particular expression of a woman who has just discovered something that confirms something she has long suspected. She was in a dark green dress that suited her perfectly, her hair loose, her posture easy. She looked precisely like the version of herself she had been working toward in the years when she and Quinn had occupied adjacent offices at the same landscape architecture firm, and competed for the same senior commissions. Quinn had won most of them, until the circumstances that determined such things had changed, and then she had won none of them. "Vanessa," Quinn said. Her voice was level. Vanessa Kirsch looked her over slowly. The gray uniform, the white apron, the tray, the belly. She took her time with it, the way people look at things they intend to describe later. I heard your firm went under, she said. Not unkindly, which was somehow worse than unkindly. I didn't realize things had gotten, she gestured, vaguely toward Quinn's uniform, this difficult. Two women nearby had angled their shoulders toward the conversation without turning their heads. Quinn recognized the posture. She had attended enough events like this one, over enough years to know exactly what it meant. They smelled something, and they were positioning themselves to absorb it while maintaining the appearance of having been focused on their own conversation all along. Vanessa's eyes moved to Quinn's belly. And you're on your own with a baby coming. She tilted her head with the careful sympathy of someone who has practiced it. That must be incredibly hard. Gavin must not know you're here. He would have, well. A small pause shaped to hold maximum implication. He would have done something about it, I'm sure. Quinn felt the words land. She felt the pull, familiar, persistent, to explain herself. To make Vanessa Kirsch understand that this was not failure, that this was what surviving looked like, when there was no net beneath you and you refused to fall, that she had built something real and lost it, and was building again, and that the uniform and the apron and the swollen feet did not erase any of it. She felt the urge to say all of that. She set her tray down on the nearest surface. Then she looked directly into Vanessa Kirsch's eyes. Enjoy the evening, she said. She picked up her tray and walked. Behind her, Vanessa said something to the two women in a low, amused tone, the kind of remark that needed witnesses to survive. Quinn did not turn around. She counted her steps instead, the way she had learned to do in the months after everything collapsed, when the world sometimes narrowed to the simple task of placing one foot in front of the other without stopping. 1. The uniform, which said nothing permanent about her. 2. The savings account she had rebuilt from $43. 3. The lease she was signing on Tuesday. 4. Ethan, the only part of the last 2 years that had ever felt entirely, unconditionally right. 5. Vanessa Kirsch was not owed a single further thought. 6. This night would end. 7. Tomorrow would come regardless. She reached the service station and set the tray down, pressed both palms flat against the counter, closed her eyes for one breath. The dizziness arrived without announcement. It started at the edges of her vision, a slight brightening, almost peaceful, the way the world looks just before something tilts. She gripped the counter edge. The room seemed to shift left then right. She stood very still and waited for it to pass. Meridian was there before Quinn had fully processed what was happening. One arm around her waist, firm and unhurried, the way Meridian did everything. I've got you, Meridian said low. Don't try to straighten up yet. I'm fine. You went white. Meridian kept her voice below the ambient noise of the gala. When did you last have water? Quinn thought back, before the shift, 4 hours ago at least. Sit, Meridian said. She guided Quinn to the low stool behind the service station. Quinn sat. The dizziness eased at the edges but did not clear entirely. She pressed one hand flat against her sternum and breathed in the deliberate, measured way her prenatal instructor had shown her. The kind of breathing designed to communicate to the body that it was not in crisis, even when crisis felt close. She had felt the tightenings twice in the last hour. She had assumed they were Braxton Hicks. She had not said anything because she needed the shift, and because she was not going to be the person who stopped a 300-guest grand opening gala, because her body was practicing. Meridian crouched in front of her, one hand on Quinn's knee. How far apart are the tightenings? Quinn looked at her. The ones you've been feeling and not telling anyone about, Meridian said, without judgment, because she had seen this before. She had seen everything before. I'm 34 weeks, Quinn said. It's too early. Early doesn't always get a vote. Meridian looked toward the main floor and raised one hand, catching the eye of a young server 20 feet away. She spoke to him quietly. He nodded and moved at once toward the event manager. The gala continued around them. The string quartet played something stately and unhurried. A man near the bar was making people laugh. The chandeliers sent amber light across the walnut panels, and the white tablecloths, and the 300 people who were performing, with varying degrees of success, the particular kind of ease that money is supposed to make permanent. None of them were watching the service station. Except one. She heard the shift in the room before she heard his footsteps. The particular redistribution of attention that surrounded Gavin Sherwood wherever he went. Conversations adjusting, shoulders straightening, the whole room quietly reorganizing itself around his direction of travel. He stopped in front of the service station. His eyes went to Meridian first, reading her expression, her posture, and then to Quinn. Quinn. His voice was different, quieter than the voice she remembered from boardrooms and dinner parties, stripped of its professional register. Are you? I'm fine, she said. The event manager says paramedics have been called. That was not necessary. He crouched down to her level without being asked. It was a small thing, and it was not small at all. He looked at her face, carefully without the managed distance she had grown used to from him, and waited. Quinn held herself still under his attention. "How long have the contractions been coming?" he asked. She opened her mouth to correct the word, felt another tightening begin, low and firm and entirely uninterested in her plans for it. She closed her eyes, breathed in, breathed out. Let the wave move through her without fighting it. When she opened her eyes, Gavin had not moved. He was watching her with an expression she did not have a name for and did not want to need a name for. Not tonight. The paramedics arrived 7 minutes later. The guests nearest the service station had noticed by then. Heads had turned, phones had lowered. The quartet had faltered for the first time all evening and resumed bravely. Vanessa Kirsch stood 20 feet away, with an expression caught between concern and something else entirely. Quinn did not look at her. She let Marion take one hand, let the paramedic take the other and walked toward the lift. The drive to Vancouver General was 12 minutes. Quinn lay on the stretcher and looked at the ceiling, and listened to the monitor tracking Ethan's heartbeat. Fast, steady, insistent. The most grounding sound she had ever known. She held on to it the way she had held on to certain things all year. The lease number, the baby's name, the specific weight of Marion's hand on her tray. Gavin sat across from her on the narrow bench, elbows on his knees, hands locked together until his knuckles had gone pale. His jacket was gone, his tie was undone. His dress shoes were scuffed at the toes from crossing the gallery floor too quickly. He looked nothing like the man on the building's promotional materials. He looked like a person who had just outrun something, and was not yet sure what. "You don't need to be here," Quinn said. "I know. It's your night. The building will still be there in the morning." She looked at him for a long time. The ambulance moved through the city with its lights going, and the city parted around it with the indifferent efficiency of a place that had seen everything. "I'm going to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to just hear it." No reaction, not yet. Gavin lifted his eyes to hers. She had thought, in the 10 months since she had walked out of his apartment, at 6 in the morning with her shoes in her hand, that she had made her peace with him, never knowing that she would raise Ethan with the same stubborn competence she had applied to everything else that mattered. Alone, clear-eyed, unglamorous, sufficient. She had decided it was the right call. That appearing at his door with this information would feel to him like a demand. And she was done asking Gavin Sherwood for things he wasn't ready to give. Looking at him now, she was not entirely sure if that had been wisdom or pride. Probably both. "The baby is yours," she said. The words were quiet. They carried no performance. They were simply the truth, stated plainly. The way she had always tried to state things when they were important enough to deserve it. Gavin went completely still. "I found out 5 weeks after I left," she said. "I thought about calling. I decided." She paused, finding the honest version. "I decided I wasn't going to hand you a complication in the middle of the most important project of your career, and I decided I was not going to let my son's life begin as something you had to manage." Something moved across Gavin's face, not one thing but several arriving at once like weather. "His name is Ethan," she said. He pressed the back of his hand to his mouth. For a moment he looked past her out the small rear window of the ambulance, at the city lights streaking past in the dark. She watched his throat move as he swallowed. Watched the careful composure he had maintained for 38 years begin, quietly, to fail him. "I missed," he started. 10, not harshly, just honestly. "Yes." He lowered his hand. His eyes were bright with something he was not accustomed to showing in front of anyone. "I'm here now," he said. She held his gaze. "That's not nothing," she said. "But I need you to understand that here now is the beginning. It is not the whole story. It doesn't undo what the year cost me. And Ethan will decide in time what it means to him." Gavin nodded slowly, the nod of a man who understood he was not in a position to negotiate terms and was not going to try. "I understand," he said. Quinn looked away, back at the ceiling, and rested one hand over the steady rise and fall of her belly. "Then we'll see," she said. Marion arrived at Vancouver General before the hour was out, having persuaded a cab driver to follow the route, with the calm authority of a woman who had long since stopped asking for things she could simply make happen. She appeared in the waiting area with Quinn's bag over one shoulder, and a cup of tea she had extracted from somewhere in the hospital lobby, and she sat down beside Gavin in the hard plastic chairs without a word, which was perhaps the kindest thing anyone had done for him all evening. The contractions had slowed. Quinn was dehydrated and exhausted and needed to be monitored through the night, but Ethan's position was good, his heart rate was strong and steady, and there was every reason to expect the situation to resolve safely. The doctor came out at 11:30, pulling off his gloves. "She'll need to stay until morning," he said. "The baby should hold off, but Mum needs rest above everything else." She's been pushing herself very hard. Gavin stood up so fast the plastic chair caught on the linoleum. Can I see her? The doctor looked at him. The suit, the undone collar. The expression of a man who had arrived somewhere important without knowing he'd been traveling. Are you family? The doctor asked. The question settled in the air for 2 full seconds. He's the father, Marion said from her chair, calmly and without looking up from her tea. The room was quiet and soft-lit. Quinn lay with her eyes open, one hand resting on her belly looking at the ceiling. She turned her head when the door opened. Gavin stepped inside carefully, reading the room, measuring the air. He's awake? Gavin asked, glancing at the rise and fall under the blanket. He's always awake at midnight, Quinn said. He gets it from somewhere. Gavin came to the chair beside the bed and sat. He looked at her belly for a long moment, then at her face. There was something in his expression she was not accustomed to from him. An openness, undefended, the look of a person who has had something enormous arrive and has not yet found a way to be composed about it. I know I don't get to walk back in and be what I should have been, he said. Quinn looked at him. I know, she said. I need you to hold on to that understanding for longer than tonight. Anyone can feel it in a hospital at midnight. The question is what you do with it at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday when it's inconvenient. He absorbed that without argument. Can I stay for a little while, he asked. Not claiming space, not assuming, asking for it, with the particular carefulness of someone who understood they were not owed an answer in their favor. 1 hour, Quinn said. He nodded. Thank you. He settled into the chair and did not fill the silence with promises she had no reason yet to believe. He sat with his hands loosely clasped, and his eyes on the small steady motion of her breathing, and the monitor kept its sound, and the city continued outside the window, and for the first time in 10 months, Quinn let herself rest without calculating what the next day would require of her. She did not know yet what Gavin Sherwood would become in Ethan's life. She did not know if she had the capacity to build something worth having from the remains of what they had been. She did not know if Tuesday's lease signing was still on, or whether Vanessa Kirsch was already telling tonight's story to mutual acquaintances with her own particular inflections. What she knew was this. She had walked into that gala alone, pregnant in a gray catering uniform, unseen by 300 people who had once moved through the same rooms as her and called it professional acquaintance. She had been mocked by someone who needed her diminished in order to feel sufficient. She had stood in front of the man who had once been her whole future, and felt the old wound try to open, and she had kept walking anyway. And she had left with her character intact. That had always been the point. Not victory. Not witnessed vindication. Not making anyone understand the weight of what they had dismissed. Simply moving through the hardest rooms life offered without becoming someone she could not live with afterwards. Ethan shifted once beneath her hand, firm, deliberate, present. She closed her eyes. Outside, Vancouver carried on with its ordinary Thursday business, cold and indifferent and entirely unaware that somewhere on the 7th floor of one of its hospitals, a woman who had rebuilt herself from next to nothing was resting, finally, without apology. Some nights demand every last thing you have. Some people will look directly at your struggle and call it failure, because failure is easier for them to manage than your quiet, unglamorous refusal to disappear. They will say you have fallen. They will not see that standing back up is the whole story, and that it has been the whole story all along. The monitor kept its sound, the city kept its lights, and in the particular silence of a room that held no expectations of her, Quinn Barrette let the night be what it was, hard and strange and, in its own unexpected way, finally over.